It is 9:47 p.m. The Persian Gulf south of Bahrain is 30 fathoms deep and on a clear night reflects the lights of the island nation's coastline in a way that looks almost peaceful, a shimmer of amber and white on dark water, the ordinary glow of a city that has been hosting American naval forces for decades and that has spent the last 15 days doing so under conditions that bear no resemblance to ordinary. The USS Carrier Strike Group is holding station 12 nautical miles southwest of the Bahraini coast, its position selected to balance proximity to 5th Fleet headquarters ashore, with the operational depth required to maneuver in a body of water that narrows to the north into something that makes the word maneuver aspirational. The Persian Gulf is not the Arabian Sea. It is not the Red Sea. It is a semi-enclosed body of water, bordered on three sides by nations whose current relationship with American military presence ranges from cautious to hostile, and on the fourth side by the Strait of Hormuz, the passage the Carrier Strike Group transited 31 hours ago, and whose navigational geometry places hard limits on the speed and direction of any response to a threat arriving from the north. A carrier in the Persian Gulf is a powerful instrument operating in a constrained space. The Iranians understand this. They have understood it for 40 years. The campaign that killed Ali Khamenei and dismantled the IRGCN surface fleet has not changed that understanding. It has sharpened it. The Combat Information Center of the carrier is populated at 9:47 p.m. with a watch that has been on station since 6 p.m. and that has processed in those 3 hours and 47 minutes 14 separate intelligence updates on Iranian retaliatory posture. 14 updates, each one contributing to a picture that the intelligence officers have been describing with increasing directness as a near-certain launch event within the current watch period. Near certain is not certain. The distinction matters in rules of engagement. It matters less to the people in the CIC who have been living inside the escalating intelligence picture for 3 hours and 47 minutes and whose bodies have long since made their own probability assessments. The tactical action officer has been on watch since 6 p.m. She is not scheduled to be relieved until 10 p.m. She will not be relieved at 10 p.m. At 9:51 p.m., the satellite feed changes. The signals intelligence platform orbiting at 35,000 kilometers above the Gulf detects a simultaneous activation of 17 separate Iranian launch facility communications nodes, a pattern that the analysis algorithms flag in the first 4 seconds and that the duty analyst elevates to flash precedence in the next 6. The message reaches the carrier's CIC at 9:51:43 p.m. The TAO reads the heading and does not read the body because the heading is sufficient. At 9:52 p.m., the SPY-1D radar begins painting contacts. The contacts emerge from the Iranian coastline across a bearing arc of 60 degrees, spanning from the province of Bushehr in the northwest to the Keshm Island approaches in the east. They climb in the ballistic trajectories that the radar processor classifies without ambiguity. Not drones, not cruise missiles. Ballistic missiles, multiple, climbing through the lower atmosphere on descent curves aimed at the Gulf. The count builds. 4 contacts. 9, 14, 19. At 9:52:41 p.m., there are 23 distinct ballistic tracks in the upper tactical picture, plus a layer of lower altitude contacts emerging from the coastline on flat trajectories. Cruise missiles and large attack drones moving at subsonic speeds below 2,000 feet. The lower altitude layer count reaches 31 and is still building at 9:53 p.m. This is not a harassment attack. This is not a probe or a calibrated demonstration of resolve. This is a maximum effort retaliatory strike. The full operational weight of whatever Iranian launch capacity survived 16 days of American airstrikes applied simultaneously against a single target set, the Carrier Strike Group holding station southwest of Bahrain. The TAO initiates weapons free at 9:52:52 p.m. The cruiser positioned 3 miles to the carrier's northeast begins firing SM-3 Block 2A rounds at 9:53:04 p.m. The first 3 rounds climb into the dark sky above the Gulf in a sequence so rapid that the deck vibration from one launch has not fully dissipated before the next begins. The destroyers in the screen fire simultaneously. The lead destroyer northwest of the carrier, the second destroyer northeast, each vessel shooting at deconflicted targets distributed by the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network, the engagement geometry pre-computed and distributed across the force in the seconds between first detection and first launch. The mathematics of this coordination are staggering. 23 ballistic targets, multiple intercept platforms, fire control solutions running in parallel. The system distributes the problem across the force, and each ship addresses its assigned portion without duplicating effort, without leaving gaps. The entire architecture performing the function it was designed for at precisely the moment it was designed for it. At 9:54 p.m., the mid-course intercepts begin. The kill vehicles find their targets in the high atmosphere above the Gulf where the air is thin enough to make the detonation silent. White blooms on the thermal cameras, brief and total, the upper tier of an engagement that will continue working downward through the atmosphere for the next 4 minutes as surviving warheads reach terminal phase, and the lower engagement layers assume responsibility for them. The count of surviving ballistic tracks at 9:55 p.m. is 6. 17 of 23 have been intercepted in the mid-course phase. 6 warheads are in terminal descent, steering toward the strike group with guidance systems that are harder to defeat in the terminal phase than the mid-course. That maneuver that suppressed their radar signature during the final seconds of flight. The cruiser transitions to SM-2 terminal engagement solutions. The destroyer's forward fire control radars reach out and acquire the surviving warheads at ranges that require the tracking system to perform at the edge of its rated capability, pulling coherent returns from objects moving faster than rifle rounds at aspect angles that change faster than a human being can track manually. 3 SM-2s fire from the cruiser, 2 from the lead destroyer. The engagements run simultaneously. 4 intercepts confirmed. 2 warheads survive the SM-2 layer and enter the ESSM engagement zone at 9:56:11 p.m. The ESSM rounds fire. The first intercept is clean. The second warhead takes the first ESSM round without achieving fuse detonation, a proximity fuse failure that the post-engagement analysis will attribute to the extreme aspect geometry at terminal approach, and the second ESSM round intercepts at a range that causes the intercept fragmentation to scatter across the water 400 meters off the carrier's port bow. The detonation is felt on the carrier's bridge as a pressure wave in the air and a vibration in the hull that every person on the ship registers simultaneously in the same silent, physical way. That is the closest a warhead comes to the carrier tonight. 400 meters. The number will appear in the final report as an acceptable terminal engagement outcome. It will feel, to the men and women who experience the pressure wave and the vibration, like something else entirely. At 9:56 p.m., the lower altitude threat layer is 60 nautical miles out, and the engagement clock has started running on 31 cruise missiles and attack drones closing at subsonic speeds from the northwest and northeast simultaneously. The phalanx CIWS systems on the carrier and every escort vessel have been in active tracking mode since 9:53 p.m. The ESSM launchers that have not been expended against the ballistic layer begin cycling solutions. The cruiser, whose SM-3 cells are now depleted by the ballistic engagement, transitions its fire control suite entirely to the cruise missile and drone threat. The geometry of the lower altitude engagement is different from the ballistic one. Slower, more numerous, spread across a wider arc, designed to require the defending ships to track and engage more simultaneous targets for a longer duration. The MH-60R Seahawks, 2 aircraft that have been airborne since 8 p.m. on a precautionary patrol posture, are repositioned at 9:57 p.m. to cover the northern and northeastern threat sectors. The lead pilot in the northern aircraft drops to 900 feet and activates his laser designator, painting the lead cruise missile contact. The contact on the infrared camera is a tube with wings moving at low altitude with the specific, methodical patience of a weapon that does not know it is being watched. It does not need to know. It was programmed hours ago, and it will fly its programmed course until something stops it. Something stops it at 9:58 p.m. when the lead destroyer's ESSM finds it at 18 nautical miles. The engagement that follows operates at a pace that resists the human instinct to follow it sequentially. It is not sequential. It is simultaneous across multiple ships, multiple weapon systems, multiple threat tracks, on a scale that requires the CIWS to process the engagement not as a series of events, but as a constantly updating state. A picture that is changing faster than any individual element of it can be fully processed before the next change arrives. This is the reality of a maximum effort strike defense. It is not experienced as a clean sequence of problems solved. It is experienced as a rate of incoming information that must be managed at a speed that exceeds comfortable cognitive processing by crews who have trained for exactly this rate for years, in simulators that approximated it, and now in actuality that does not. At 9:59 p.m., the lead destroyer's SPY-1D radar develops a tracking anomaly. The system has been operating at maximum power output for 7 minutes against a target set that includes contacts at multiple altitudes and ranges simultaneously. The radar's transmitter cooling system is running at 97% of rated thermal capacity. An operator in the radar support space reports the temperature reading to the watch officer at 9:59 and 14 seconds p.m. The watch officer reports to the TAO. The TAO has 4 seconds to make a decision between maintaining full radar power, accepting the risk of a thermal shutdown that would produce a complete radar blackout for the time required to restart the system, and reducing power by 15%, which degrades tracking quality but keeps the system operational. She reduces power. The decision costs tracking precision on 2 contacts at the outer edge of the engagement arc. The contacts are still tracked. They are tracked less well. The fire control solutions for those 2 contacts are built on data that is marginally less precise than the solutions for every other contact in the picture. Those 2 contacts are addressed by the second destroyer, whose radar is not thermally constrained, whose solutions are clean. The engagement proceeds. The thermal decision does not produce a gap. It produces a managed degradation that the force architecture absorbs without failure. This is how layered defense is supposed to work, not as a series of perfect systems, but as a collection of systems with individual imperfections that are covered by overlapping capability, by redundancy designed into the architecture at every level. At 10:01 p.m., the cruise missile and drone count in the active engagement picture is down to 11. The ESSM expenditure rate has been high. The cruiser's aft launcher has fired its allocation and is awaiting a manual reload that will take 6 minutes. The second destroyer's forward ESSM capacity is at 44%. The engagement arc to the northeast is covered adequately. The engagement arc to the northwest is thinning. The Houthi contribution arrives at 10:02 p.m. It is not a large force. 4 platforms, modified Shahed derivatives with extended fuel capacity, launched from a position off the Yemeni coast that placed them on a northwestern approach to the Gulf, timed to arrive not as a separate wave, but as a trailing element of the Iranian strike that the defending ships have been oriented against. The 4 platforms appear on the SPY-1D at the moment when the ESSM Northwest coverage is at its thinnest, when the second destroyer is transitioning between engagement solutions and the cruiser's aft launcher is in manual reload. The timing is not coincidental. This coordination, Iranian ballistic and cruise missiles creating the conditions, Houthi platforms exploiting the gap, is the most sophisticated adversary architecture the strike group has faced in 16 days of operations. The Seahawk in the northwestern sector reacquires the 4 new contacts at 10:02:31 p.m. The lead pilot calls the contacts and the gap in the ESSM coverage simultaneously. The call reaches the TAO. The TAO has the cruiser's forward ESSM launcher, which still has rounds, shift its orientation arc northwest. The solution develops. The rounds fire. 3 of the 4 Houthi platforms are intercepted at ranges between 9 and 14 nautical miles. The 4th closes to CIWS range. The phalanx on the carrier's port bow engages at 10:03:44 p.m. The burst fires at 1.6 nautical miles. The contact absorbs the first burst and continues. The second burst fires at 1.1 nautical miles. The contact is destroyed. Its debris enters the water 900 meters off the carrier's port bow in a pattern of small splashes that the thermal camera captures as a spray of white points against the dark water, brief and extinguishing, the last statement of a weapon that was designed in Iran, coordinated with Houthi forces in Yemen, and came within 900 meters of the flight deck before the phalanx took it apart. 900 meters from a carrier flight deck in the Persian Gulf. The flight deck crews, who had been ordered below for the engagement period, are not yet back on the deck. The aircraft parked on the deck, F/A 18S, chained and spotted for the next sortie cycle, absorbed a pressure wave from the nearby detonation that will require structural inspection of 6 aircraft before they are cleared to fly again. 6 aircraft that will not be flying for a period measured in hours while the maintenance teams work through inspection protocols in the heat and noise of a carrier that has not finished assessing the full scope of what just happened. At 10:06 p.m., the tactical picture clears. No remaining active inbound contacts. The TAO conducts the force-wide status check in a voice that has been level for the past 14 minutes and is level now, delivering the check as a procedural act rather than an emotional release. Because the status check is the job, and the job continues regardless of what the body is doing. Every ship responds. Every ship is maneuvering. The cruiser reports SM-3 cells fully expended. The second destroyer reports ESSM at 31%. The lead destroyer reports a radar cooling system at 89% thermal capacity, down from 97%. Recovering, but not yet at the baseline that would make the watch officer comfortable recommending full power operations. The carrier reports 6 aircraft requiring structural inspection, no personnel casualties, no flight deck structural damage, no ordnance cook-offs from the nearby detonations. The damage assessment is, by any measure of what the engagement presented, a favorable outcome. It is also a carrier that cannot launch 6 aircraft until the inspection clears, at a point in a 16-day campaign when aircraft availability is a number that the operations staff checks against the sortie schedule every 4 hours. At 10:11 p.m., the CO of the carrier transmits the post-engagement report to 5th Fleet. The report is 2 pages. It covers threat composition, engagement sequence, weapons expenditure, radar thermal event, Houthi coordination with Iranian strike package, aircraft inspection requirement, and magazine state across the force. The magazine state section of the report is the one that 5th Fleet's operations staff will read first and read closely. The cruiser needs SM-3 replenishment before it can effectively cover another ballistic engagement at this scale. The destroyers need ESSM replenishment within 48 hours to sustain current operational tempo. The replenishment geometry in the Persian Gulf, a semi-enclosed body of water with limited sea room and a Strait of Hormuz exit that adds operational complexity to every logistics movement, is not simple. Nothing about operations in the Persian Gulf is simple. The Gulf does not permit simplicity. It permits only the discipline to manage complexity at the rate it arrives. At 10:19 p.m., the maintenance crews on the carrier's flight deck begin the structural inspection sequence on the 6 affected aircraft. The inspectors work in teams of 2, moving through inspection points in a sequence that is procedurally defined and physically demanding, checking fasteners and airframe joints and control surface attachments by hand and by instrument in the noise and heat of a flight deck that smells of jet fuel and the residual metallic scent of a CIWS engagement that happened 900 meters away 8 minutes ago. The inspection will take 4 hours. The aircraft will be cleared or they will not. The sortie schedule will adapt to the outcome. The Persian Gulf at 10:24 p.m. looks from the bridge of the carrier the same as it looked at 9:46 p.m. Dark water. The lights of Bahrain to the northeast. The running lights of the escort vessels on their stations. The stars where the Gulf haze permits them. 23 ballistic missiles. 31 cruise missiles and attack drones. 4 Houthi platforms in coordination. 14 minutes of continuous multi-layered engagement, 6 aircraft requiring inspection, 1 cruiser with depleted SM-3 cells, 0 personnel casualties, 0 ships struck, 0 inches yielded. 17 days of Operation Epic Fury have reduced Iran's launch capacity, degraded its command architecture, and dismantled its surface fleet. They have not changed the calculation of an adversary that still has weapons, still has crews willing to use them, and still has a geographic position that makes the Persian Gulf a space where American power must be asserted at cost rather than assumed at leisure. The strike group holds its station. The maintenance crews work through the night. The watch rotates in the CIC. The Gulf does not become safer because the engagement ended. It becomes the baseline from which the next engagement will be measured, by crews who will be ready because they have no other option and because readiness is the only answer the ocean accepts. The shield showed its cracks tonight. It held because the people inside it had spent years building something stronger than what it takes to hold,